There's a little-known part of Hollywood that most people are not aware of, known as the audience test preview. The recently released book, Audienceology, reveals this for the first time. Our podcast series, Don't Kill the Messenger, brings this book to life, taking a peek behind the curtain. And now, join author and entertainment research expert, Kevin Goetz.
I call this podcast Don't Kill the Messenger, largely because I sometimes have to deliver information that clients don't like to hear. Today's guest has been on the receiving end of this in the past, but thankfully, over the years, he's heard far more positive feedback from me. But through it all, he has understood that I am just the conduit and the interpreter of information, and filmmakers can take what they want from it. Nick Stoller is the nicest guy. He started as a screenwriter and today is also a producer and one of the most commercially successful directors of his generation. Over the years, he's worked on films including Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Get Him to the Greek, Neighbors, The Muppets, Zoolander 2, and Dora, The Lost City of Gold. He also works in television and has created 2 shows just this past year, Goosebumps and Platonic. Nick, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm very flattered.
Will Gluck was here, and I said to him, yeah, it's funny. We talk about how wonderful a comedy director you are, but you're really not that funny. That went over really... No, actually, he loved it. You are very funny, but you're very dry. Mm-hmm. You let things happen to you. Is that something you've always sort of...
Like, as a person, my instinct is always to, like, make jokes. I don't know why. I don't know if that's just to cut the tension or whatever. It's just something that I've always done. But I'm really bad at remembering jokes. I literally can't remember any jokes. Like, if you were to say tell a joke, I wouldn't be able to tell it.
But yet you seem to write them well. So you can then, I guess you're drawing upon things that you do remember in some respect, right? Yeah,
I feel like most of my comedy just comes from human behavior. It's more than being joke-driven, or that's the way I think about it, at least. Like it tends to be the biggest laughs. I mean, as you know from all the research you've done, when something relatable happens to a character, more than when someone says a joke.
So I want to unpack that a little because we're doing research on you before this interview and discovered that you were born in England. Mm-hmm. You were born in London?
Yes, I was born in England. My parents are American. They lived there from 1970 to 1980. And so my brother and I were born there. And then we moved to Miami in 1980. So I was 4 years old when we moved.
Why Miami?
My dad is from Miami, and their parents, my grandparents, lived in Miami. And so I think they've wanted to move to Miami.
This is going to sound really strange, but Miami doesn't seem like a funny place.
New
York's a funny place.
Yeah.
Canada is funny. But Miami is not.
Miami's pretty funny. I love Miami's beautiful.
How did you get formed as the guy you are today, growing up in Southern Florida?
There's something about growing up just not in New York or LA or a big city, and Miami is now a much bigger city than it was when I was growing up. That gives not an outsider perspective, but when I got to New York, I was more like wide-eyed and amazed by all of that. When I got to LA, I was more, and so you have a bit more, even though obviously it's a major city, you have a bit more of an outsider. I feel like I had a slightly outsider perspective. And it's also a very specific place. It's very, very diverse.
Was the first time you left really going to Harvard?
No, I went to boarding school.
Oh, so in New Hampshire,
in
right?
New Hampshire, yeah.
Why did you go to boarding school?
I don't know.
Did your brother go too?
My brother went too. It just seemed interesting, and my parents were like, you should take a look at this. And so we looked at it, and it looked like fun. And it's the 4 years of my life where I'm Jewish, where I wasn't surrounded by Jews.
What was the name of the school?
St. Paul's School.
Yeah.
So it's an Episcopal school.
High school?
High school, yeah. And I started a satire magazine there. I was always into comedy.
And then you worked at Harvard Lampoon, didn't you?
Yeah, then went to Harvard and did the Lampoon.
Which you didn't start.
No. That's been around forever.
I think that was like in the time of Thomas Jefferson or something. Yeah. But going back to New Hampshire, what's it like for a kid, I guess you're like 14?
Yeah.
To be sent to New Hampshire? Are you excited by that or are you terrified?
I had loved camp. So I'd gone to sleepaway camp, and I thought it would be like sleepaway camp, and it was not. And so I got there, and I didn't really like it. And it took me about 2 years to kind of like it.
And your parents kind of said, no, you committed to this.
My parents were like, give it a year. And I gave it a year, and I was like, I'm not someone who gives up. And I felt like I need to keep working at this until I beat it.
What did it teach you?
It taught me how to fit in with people who aren't exactly like me. You know, I would like say a joke to a bunch of waspy people and they would not get it at all because like we're literally from different cultures. So I think like there was an element of just like learning to fit in. It was tough. It was like a tough 4 years, you know, but I think I learned how to be, I don't know, comfortable in my own skin.
I think that's a really cool phrase.
Yeah.
Where you get to really discover yourself.
In high school, I found a group of like-minded friends who were all into comedy. And by the time I graduated, I kind of knew I wanted to do comedy writing, but we started the Satire magazine, I found my friends, and then I got to college. That was really, you know, I really wanted to lampoon.
Wait, okay. Talk to me about that process. So you're kind of a funny guy. You thought funny.
Yeah.
And you were able to, though, translate that to the page, which a lot of people can't do.
Mm-hmm.
Did you like writing? Is that your kind of, you consider yourself a writer more than anything? At your core?
At my core, yeah. I always was obsessed with comedy and comedy writing.
Who are your icons?
It started with, weirdly, because I'm from Florida, with this writer, Dave Barry, who's a syndicated columnist. I don't know if you even know. Like
Dave Barry, yeah.
He's just and I basically found one of his books, read it. It was like the funniest thing in the world to me. And he was from Miami and from Florida, and write about Florida and write for the Miami Herald. And I started to
Those funny Floridians.
Funny Floridians, exactly. I started to rip off his writing style and just writing my own Dave Barry-esque art
Did you end up meeting him?
I sent him a letter and said, do you need someone to intern for you? And he replied very nicely, no, I don't. I need like a 14-year-old to intern for me. But thank you for the offer.
Did you meet him as an adult?
I went to a book signing when I was a kid. I haven't met him. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, who else? Who are some of your other early influences?
Monty Python, you know. Basically every kind of thing that keeps you a virgin until late in life is my influences. All Saturday Night Live. I was obsessed with Saturday Night Live. But I was always obsessed with writing it. I didn't want to act in anything. I was obsessed with the writers. Like there's this famous writer named Doug Kenny who was on the Lampoon and wrote for Saturday Night Live. I always knew who the writers were. Somehow I figured that out. I don't know how.
And you were wanting to, say, write for Saturday Night Live?
I always wanted to write for Saturday Night Live, and my dream was to write and direct movies, but that seemed, I just had no idea how that would work. So my goal was to hopefully write for TV.
And what does your brother do?
He's in politics. He runs a think tank that's all about antitrust. And so he was actually, during the strikes
He lives in Washington?
He lives in D.C., but during the strikes, there was a lot of people reaching out to him from the Guild to talk about antitrust.
Wow, how cool is that?
Yeah.
Now, so you go to Harvard. What'd you study?
English.
Greatest major. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, I mean, really. And in my company, it's one of the best majors you can have.
Yeah.
I think because it serves you in life, in anything, really.
Yeah.
And there's almost a joke about English majors, I learned, because they figure it's not a specific enough major, and I find it a very specific major.
When I was in college, I wish that Harvard had a more robust film program, and in retrospect, I'm glad I did English and that there wasn't that robust film program. They kind of have a film program, but it's not like USC or whatever. Because I read all these books, I still am a big reader, and you really are focused on essay writing, and writing a screenplay isn't that dissimilar to writing an essay in terms of being very focused on a certain,
Sure.
It has to be very, very focused.
Now, when you got out of Harvard, what was your first gig?
I worked at an advertising firm called Young & Rubicam.
Oh, yes, we've heard of it.
Yeah.
In New York?
In New York, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you were a copywriter?
Yeah. I wanted to just prove that I could get a job and to get paid
But also,
to do something.
no better training for a writer than to turn out copy, especially if you're working on like some of those local campaigns.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like my husband Neil worked for Campbell Methune and Asher Gould, and he would have to turn out the Kroger's.
Copywriter.
It made him a great writer.
Yeah. So I started as an unpaid intern in the summer, and then it turned into a job because I sold some ads. And the thing it taught me is I just don't believe in writer's block. They would just kind of give you a thing. Like at the time, there was this Sony Ericsson cell phone. It's the most boring thing in the world. It is a phone. That's all it is. And they gave it to me, and they were like, come up with 10 print ads. And you just have to do it. And it is the most boring thing in the world to have to come through. But I was so excited to get to write for a living.
Did they like your work there?
They did, yeah. They liked my work.
And what happened?
I basically, the first year, you don't get paid a lot. But if you prove yourself, the second year, your salary jumps a lot. And I was like, I've got to quit before the golden handcuffs come on. And I was also spending that year applying to all the TV shows in New York.
You knew that about golden.
Yeah, I was
you intuitively had a sense that
I was like,
I didn't want to go on this track.
Yeah. I wanted to write for TV and hopefully write and direct
movies. So what did you do about it?
So I applied to all the TV shows in New York. At the time, it was like Letterman, Saturday Night Live, Conan O'Brien, and nothing happened.
How do you apply for those shows? Seriously.
I mean, I was very lucky because of the Harvard Lampoon. There's a real network, a comedy network. And so I would apply through friends. There's a legitimate network. But it didn't work out, and I moved to LA in 99 after kind of applying to stuff there. And then I got very, very lucky.
So this is right after Young and Rubicon? That was the way
I
you
quit.
went right to LA?
Yeah, I went right to LA.
Oh,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Because you weren't having success getting a job in what you wanted to do in New York. You're saying, let me try my hand at LA. Kind of my situation in a way. Similar.
Oh, really?
New York. Yeah, same thing. And then
it's just a small pool in New York, entertainment.
So what did you do as soon as you got here?
Well, when I got here, I got very lucky. I got a job writing for a show. It was an Austin Powers animated series for HBO. It never happened. Basically, a friend of mine...
This is post-release of the Mike Myers movie.
Yeah, this is right before the second one, but after the first one. So at the time, it's hard to believe this, but Austin Powers was the most popular thing in the world. So my friend, who's a big TV writer, who was writing for Saturday Night Live at the time, Mike Schur, recommended me to his former Saturday Night Live office mate to be a writer on this Austin Powers show, and they hired me as a staff writer, which was a crazy stroke of good luck. They ended up deciding not to do the show, but I got an agent during those 10 weeks of the show. His office mate, Mike McCullers, is the one who hired me. And
where was the agent?
It was at UTA.
Mm-hmm. Is that where you still are today?
Yeah, I'm still there with the same agents. Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
How many years are you with the same agents?
24 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, they're really good agents.
Goes awesome. Back to my opening about your being a good guy. I mean, there's good guy loyalty. It's all sort of synonymous to me about. No, it's cool. So you get your first big break where?
I considered getting on that show and getting an agent kind of my first big break. Even though it didn't happen, it was like,
that's fair.
And then my second big break was Judd Apatow hired me for his show Undeclared.
Well, I was trying to throw you that bait, but
that was my second huge break. And he was hiring basically just from UTA.
How did he find you?
He just said to UTA, send me your youngest writers.
Younger or funniest?
I think young and funny, but because the show was about college, he wanted. I was really.
Got it. That's why.
And I was obsessed with his tone, and I was obsessed with Freaks and Geeks.
Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah, I loved Freaks and Geeks, and I remember interviewing with him, and he wanted us to pitch a bunch of ideas. So I just wrote down a bunch of stuff that had happened to me in college, and pitched him this stuff. And I remember him being like laughing really hard.
Do one for me. Like, what would you say in a pitch like that?
I mean, the funniest one was my college roommate and I both
Hold
had...
on, I just want to say it's like my grandmother. Darling, sing.
I
Sing
know,
for them.
I know exactly.
And then I don't want to say, I'm going to be upset. Sing.
Well, it's just like, this was just like, you don't want me to sing. I'm a bad... Yeah, my college roommate and I both had long-distance girlfriends at the time, and in freshman year. And I remember us talking about them, and then I ended up having a sleepover in his bedroom. Like, I slept on the floor, and he slept in his bed. And he put on his prom song, which was this Erasure song, Always I Want to Be With You, that song. And then we both just lay there and cried. It's like so lame. But I remember, and I was like, it was so funny.
That is funny.
Yeah, it's really funny. And I was like,
this totally see Judd.
Yeah, it's in Judd's wheelhouse. Yeah.
What else did you pitch him? Any other?
That was the one that I remember that I was like, this would be in Freaks and Geeks.
My Lord. And so he said, you're hired there?
Then he hired it. Yeah.
Did he tell you right there?
He didn't, but I had a good feeling after the meeting, and then he hired me. That was an amazing experience.
How long did that show stay on?
That show was on for just a season.
But then
17
you
episodes.
ended up working with Judd on several movies.
Yeah, so then it ended, and I was trying to get another job, and he told me, we write the screenplay with me, and we wrote a script for Adam Sandler it was fun to write, but didn't happen. But it went well, and then we wrote Fun with Dick and Jane together, and that happened. That was with,
and that's where I think I met you.
Yeah, that would have.
I think I met you on Fun with Dick and Jane.
Okay.
What did you direct first?
Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
And how did that come to be?
So Jason Segel and I became friends on Undeclared. I would say that our artistic interests are similar in that we are really into romance. We're really into like men and women and just romance in general,
what those conflicts are.
What those conflicts are. I was not saying that, but men and men too, like anything, any romance is what, like I would say like that is the artistic project of my life and what I'm interested in, what I like to watch. And I think it's true of him as well. And so he had written Forgetting Sarah Marshall and he told me about it. And by that point, I'd written some screenplays and was kind of making my way at making a name as a screenwriter. And Judd had just done 40-Year-Old Virgin, and I think Knocked Up was starting. I don't know. He had leverage. And I said to Judd, if I help Jason kind of guide him through the writing process, will you support me as a director? And Judd said, sure, and just kind of went from there.
And he produced it?
He produced it.
I remember that. And then did you then move into Get Him to the Greek?
Then I did get into the Greek because
I worked on that with you as well.
Yeah, they both had really good chemistry.
And then we started our relationship.
I know, exactly.
Did
you work on Sarah Marshall?
I did not.
I don't think so, yeah.
It's funny because I think I've done every single movie that Judd has ever been involved with, except that one.
Yeah.
I think.
That was a really fascinating testing process.
Wait, maybe I did do that. Maybe it's Knocked Up I'm talking about. But anyway, tell me about the screening process on Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
That was a huge learning experience for me because my early cut of it was Jason's character, he's depressed. And so I thought it would be very funny for him to always be crying all the time. And like that just made me laugh. And what I learned is the audience hates that. They hate someone who's sad, but they love someone who's pretending to be happy. And it was like a huge difference.
Wow, that's interesting for our listeners here. That's a good note. And so
someone who's in denial is the funniest thing in the world. And also, you root for that person because you're like, they're trying their hardest. Whereas someone who's just sad, you're like, you're not trying. But when someone's trying and they're like looking at you, I mean, Jason has the best, most expressive eyes. His eyes are sad, but he's smiling. It's the funniest thing in the world. And so that was a huge learning experience. And it's honestly something I've taken to everything I've done since then because most characters are in denial.
Well, you have a great ability to find the funny in a way that's almost easier than what I'm about to say, which is finding the heart. Mm-hmm. Every one of your movies has some center of heartfelt something, right? It's about something. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
And so does Judd, by the way.
Yeah.
Judd has the same kind of thing.
It's funny, we had some interview during Bros, and they were like, why do you work together? And Judd was like, I mean, we have the same tone. It's like literally, I don't, like he and I share the same tone. And I think that the core of any good comedy, and I think Will Gluck might have said this to you too, is that it's a drama.
No, he didn't say that.
Oh, he didn't say that. Okay.
No, I'm just joking.
I think he might have said it. But they're dramas. Everything is, and it's tone. It's the tone that you bring. And I see the world comedically, but the core of every one of my movies is dramatic. It has to be.
Judd was kind enough to add a segment to my reel when I'm being honored for this American Cinematheque Award.
Yeah.
He's in bed on the video, and he's got a pillow, and he looks like he just woke up. And it is the funniest thing. It is so real. And so, like, you really feel he's just making it up as he's going along, which, of course, he is to some degree, but he knows exactly where the ending is. Do you see? And I find that so genius. And I love Judd's process when we test movies, and it's very, very similar to yours, which is I'm going to try a lot of stuff. I'm going to get most of the value of the screening in listening to the audience. Tell me about that and how you depend on the audience in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's hearing the laughs, certainly. So feeling the laughs, but it's also, it's like a feeling of where they're engaged and where they're not. And also, honestly, the focus group ends up being really helpful too at the end, which is why I'm always like, please, Kevin, please rerun the focus group. Because I think if 16 people all say something about your movie, like negative, then that means your movie has a problem in that area, And so,
and if one person says it, you probably don't have it.
Yeah, exactly. So
but you have to have the thick skin to be able to say, all right, because everyone's got an opinion. Let's face it. But that's exactly what I always tell filmmakers, and it's what I look for, the commonalities, right? And by the way, sometimes they could be saying different things but the same note in some way because it may be a tonal note.
Yeah.
But they're saying it like differently.
Sometimes they'll try to propose a solution. It's usually not the solution that they're proposing, but the problem they're pointing out is if a majority of people say it, it is there, and you shouldn't ignore it.
So you listen to the audience and tell me what you're listening for and how you decide on what joke to maybe end up going with. And I don't think the answer is simply whoever's laughing louder at that moment.
I mean, if there's jokes that get massive laughs, I'll keep them. But I cut jokes, and this has just happened. There's a joke in the most recent movie that that just tested, this Will Ferrell, Reese Witherspoon movie called Cordially Invited. I'm very excited about it. That kind of hurt the character. And it's one of my favorite jokes I've ever written, but it kind of hurt the character. And so I cut it. I just cut it. And I mean, jokes are free. It's the story that you want to make sure is working.
Wow, that's a big note for everyone to hear who is a filmmaker listening here. Don't get too precious and don't get too married to something that may not be good for the overall arc of the character or the overall movie itself.
Yeah, and I don't run into it that much, but whenever a writer is like, no, but that joke's funny, I'm like, no. You never hold on to jokes. And I used to, I mean, when you start, you're kind of, I'll have a funny joke and I'll end up shaping scenes around this joke, and it doesn't work. It's all about the story. Everything is about the story.
Well, that's what
Story.
elevates you among so many others. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the more recent projects and also more about Cordially Invited. We'll be back in a moment.
Get a glimpse into a secret part of Hollywood that few are aware of and that filmmakers rarely talk about. In the new book, Audienceology by Kevin Goetz. Each chapter is filled with never-before-revealed inside stories and interviews from famous studio chiefs, directors, producers, and movie stars, bringing the art and science of audienceology into focus. Audienceology, how moviegoers shape the films we love. From Tiller Press at Simon & Schuster. Available now.
We're back with Nick Stoller. Nick, I have to ask you about Bros because, we worked on Bros together. I love that movie. I loved it from the beginning. It was such a movie I felt that unfortunately didn't do great at the box office, but was really a terrific movie and I believe got pretty high Rotten Tomato scores from critics.
Yeah.
So how does a straight guy in a clearly right down, unapologetic, gay romantic comedy get that gig?
I actually proposed it. So I worked with Billy Eichner, who I think is just so funny. He's such a comic genius guy.
Really funny guy.
Yeah, really funny guy. I first worked with him on Neighbors 2, and then I cast him in a big part in Friends from College. And I learned on that he really had great acting chops in addition to being really funny. And I had been interested in the idea of like a romantic comedy about two men for a while, but obviously I'm straight. I couldn't do that myself. And something that was really
who'd you
funny.
bring on? Judd Apatow?
I know exactly. I know. Well, Billy...
Who's also straight.
He's also straight.
That's a hysterical line, though.
First, I went to Billy. I didn't start with Judd. So I went to Billy and I said, would you be interested in doing this with me? And he and I share a tone. We both wanted to be really funny and very authentic and heartfelt and honest, which is what I've tried to achieve with all the movies I've done. And the way I thought about it, honestly, is a comedy vehicle for Billy Eichner, not as like a gay romantic comedy, if that makes sense. I thought of it the way I think of Sarah Marshall as a comedy vehicle for Jason Segel or Neighbors as a comedy vehicle for Seth and Zac Efron. And so it was really about getting Billy's point of view on the page.
So like you go to the sex scenes though, and I'm just going to say there was a very, very funny truth in those scenes.
Yeah.
And did you think of it as a sex scene that you might have as a straight guy, or did Billy sort of really dictate what was happening there?
I mean, Billy dictated it because they were his experiences, or pushed not his experiences.
Don't kill the messenger.
Yeah.
The truth.
I wouldn't say his experiences, a pushed version of them.
Of course.
And obviously, it was that whole movie. I mean, I don't need to tell you, it was all about masculinity and all this other stuff. And so there was also a bit of a parody of masculinity.
How can you say I have a major man crush on Luke?
Oh my God! I ended up casting him in Platonic right after.
Did you really?
Yeah. The show that my wife and I created together.
He is such a terrific guy. He plays all these straight guys on these Hallmark movies.
Yeah.
And I would look at him when we would see some of those movies on television and I'd say, oh, he's really handsome. He's really good. And then to find out he was gay, I was like, you just feel like a sense of, yes, join the team.
Yeah, he's very handsome. He's the nicest guy too, like the sweetest guy, and so funny. And yeah, on Platonic, he's playing a straight guy. He plays Rose's husband. Who is,
let's talk about another comedic genius.
Oh my God, she's a genius, yeah.
I mean, like, seriously.
She's like Peter Sellers. I think. Because she can do these weird characters like the character she didn't get in the Greek. And she can also play like Seth's wife in Neighbors, and in Platonic she's just
Spy.
Insane. Yeah. In Spy, she's so funny.
But what is it about her? You know what is she's so damn pretty.
She's just...
No, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But so you might dismiss the fact that she could be so funny.
She's so funny.
And self-deprecating. She doesn't mind being self-deprecating.
She's very, she doesn't care. She'll just go hard for the joke. She doesn't.
How about Damages?
Oh, yeah. She's great in that.
Damages.
Yeah.
She plays a fully dramatic, not a funny bone in that character's body, I don't think.
Well,
barely. She is so good.
When she came in to read for Again to the Greek, all I knew was Damages. And I was like, what is Rose Byrne doing here? Like, I literally, because she'd only done serious stuff. And then we had read a lot of people for that part. And I remember she read, and it was like, this is the funniest person I've ever read. Like, she was so funny. I mean, I have a weird theory about her, which is that she's kind of a like low energy person playing high energy characters. I think there's something about, she's not low energy is the wrong,
exactly
you know what I mean? She's not, she's just not, she's very dry.
Yes.
She's on a set, she's very quiet. I mean, she's hilarious and awesome. She does not need to be the center of attention.
And because there's also an intellect to her. You don't believe her as a stupid gal.
It's like when Robin Williams would play, who's very high energy, would play a quieter character.
Well, to me, that was the only time I liked him, really, to be honest
when you
with
play
you.
the opposite of
I liked Robin when Good Will Hunting, for example, when he didn't wink at the audience.
Yeah.
And he was just sort of he's a Juilliard-trained actor.
Well, you feel a vibrating intensity there that is exciting,
Is there a particular talent you've worked with who's just an exceptional comedic gifted artist other than Rose?
I mean, Rose is also physically. I mean, I've just been very lucky.
Physically what?
A physical comedian. Yeah, no, she's an incredible physical comedian.
You might want to finish
statement.
Statement.
She was in the show Physical. No, she's a physically gifted comedian. She's so funny as a physical comedian. I mean, I've just been really, really lucky. We want
names.
Names of people. I mean, I'll just end up going down my IMDb pages. I mean, Jason Segel is.
What is it about Jason? Because I agree. I actually think Jason is a very underrated actor.
He's
he's a really terrific actor.
Did you see the end of the tour? You must have seen it. It's an incredible performance. Incredible performance. He just is. He'll do some weird little piece of behavior, and the audience will explode. They think it's so funny. And then Seth, who's a comic genius and
what makes
writer.
Seth? So
Seth's thing is he's just a joke delivery. He can just land joke after joke, and he's a really good actor too. He's it's super warm. But he has the ability to deliver jokes that are completely naturalistic.
Another good actor
and an amazing actor and very warm. And also is an amazing physical comedian, but he's very natural. He's supernatural at saying jokes, which is very hard to do.
How about Zach?
Zach is insanely charismatic and really committed. I mean, everyone has their own process, but up until that point was more used to the way comedians approach stuff. And he's not a comedian, he's an actor, but his intensity made that part so funny. And I remember screening the movie and the audience just died laughing at his intensity. Like when he tells Seth and Rose when they call the cops on him that he's disappointed in them, it's one of the funniest. He's so funny. And he's not even trying to. He knows I think he knows it's funny, but he's not trying to be funny. He's invested in the character.
Who would you like
committed.
To work with who you haven't worked with comedically?
I'm obsessed with Ryan Gosling. I think he's so funny. In his dramatic stuff, Drive is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh, God, I worked on that movie, but also Lars and the Real Girl?
Oh, it's so funny. Yeah.
There's something about his choices of material always been impeccable.
Oh, yeah.
Part of being a star, I think, is selecting, obviously.
It's a huge part of it.
It's a huge part of it, right? You also...
I'll say on my bucket list of actors was Will Ferrell and Reese Witherspoon, and to get to work with them was insane.
Let's segue there because I'm going to
I should just say I was pretty starstruck and excited to work with them.
Okay, so I can't really talk about movies before they come out, but I think you can. I will just say that it is hysterical, and it also has great heart. Mm-hmm. There's a scene actually in this amazing romp where I cried. You want to talk about how you got involved in that project and how you found that balance?
My goal for almost all my movies is to make people cry more than laugh. I know that sounds weird.
Do you want to tell the scene I'm referring to?
Is it the mother? Yeah. There's a scene between Reese and her mother.
Played by
Celia Weston, the great Celia. Yeah.
Celia Weston is she's so one of those actors who you've seen in so many things, don't necessarily know her name.
Yeah.
Unless you're in the industry, right? But she delivers this pathos that is just so insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's so good in it. Reese and her mom have not a great relationship, and she plays kind of a scary mom and not the nicest. She doesn't seem that nice, and it's all about peeling back those layers.
What is the movie about?
It's about a double book destination wedding. So there's two weddings that both book the same place on the same weekend. And so Will's daughter is getting married, and Reese's sister is getting married.
But what is the movie about?
Oh, about?
No, you answered the question. That's what I'm trying to get at, is what's going on with you as a filmmaker. Because that's just the plot.
That's the plot. Yeah, the emotional
that's
stuff.
What I'm getting at.
It's about being honest with your family. That's really what it's about. It's also about getting older, a bit. I'm 47. I think it's about both those things.
You said there was a line you said that Will said that you ended up taking out because it hurt the character. How so?
To me, the exciting part of this movie is bringing Will Ferrell and Reese Witherspoon and putting them in
and we all know they're going to get together as an audience, right?
But also the movies they've done are slightly different. I would just to paint in a broad brush, like hers can be a bit more grounded and his are a bit more comedic or whatever. And so to bring them into the same movie, but I was just like, it's my tone, so I'm trying to do my tone too. I think bringing them to the same reality level is all. And they're both excellent actors and can pull it off. So it's the choices I'm making as a director. And he had a joke kind of late in the movie, kind of right where he has this moment, he has a scene with his daughter where they're making up. And he had a joke that is one of my favorite jokes that he said, but I think it hurt. But then like literally 3 minutes later, he is in a car with Reese Witherspoon and saying, I like you, and they kiss and stuff. Not to, ruin it. And that joke kind of just made the audience be like, but I don't know if she should be with him.
Right.
Right.
I don't say this obviously to give anything away, and that won't, but it illustrates the sophistication that one has to have when looking at the whole, the total.
Yeah.
And often because you have a star, there's an inclination to not want to cut. There's often for a young filmmaker, not like yourself, to favor a particular actor in a role because they're enamored with them and they think everything they do is spectacular. And I often say, I find myself saying to filmmakers, you're not helping this actor. You're not helping that character by keeping that. We've got it. The audience is ahead of you.
Yeah.
Do you know? Can you speak to that? Has that been prevalent in other movies as well, that notion?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty harsh in terms of cutting stuff down. My joke is that I've put my kids in little roles in my movies and cut them out of all of them. So like literally it's
You
my
did
children.
not.
I did.
Well,
yeah.
that's just plain bullshit, man.
Yeah.
That's just plain bad.
I know.
And what does your wife say about that? I wouldn't come home.
I'm just like, I'm sorry, it makes the movie worse. I don't know what to tell you. It's this, but it's always story. It's
Are
all.
they in
They're not in
Cordially
this.
Invited?
They're not in this one.
Oh, okay.
They were in school. They were in Platonic, so they're in the TV show. But yeah, I think it's all story driven. So it's all what the story demands. What was harder about this is that joke got a big laugh. So you have to. It's not that it didn't. Like if a joke doesn't get a laugh, it go away. But this got a big laugh.
Well, so I'll say often, everyone loves that scene. It's one of the best liked scenes on the questionnaire.
Yeah.
And I say, yes, but it doesn't belong in this movie.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is a great scene and it works.
Yeah.
But you're hurting by having that scene, or at least placed in that part of the movie, is sending audiences here when you don't want them to go here.
Has that happened? That actually has never happened to me. Where it's one of the top 5 scenes and then you cut it.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah. I said use it for the DVD extras, because it's just not serving the overall. And that's what we're trying to do. I just did an interview this morning for The Ankler, and one of the things that we talked about was how the cadence has shifted in a movie intended to debut on a streaming service as opposed to a movie that is theatrically made to premiere as a theatrical movie. That you have to grab the audience much quicker in a streaming situation. You can actually lose 10, 20 more % of your audience if you don't grab them within the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Have you, since this movie was made for Amazon, were you mindful of that? Did you think of that? You know already who's bought your material. What do you do with that information?
I think I naturally want to grab people from the beginning and I think all my movies kind of do it, kind of grab you from the beginning. I also have had the experience of having to reshoot the beginning of a movie or reshoot. And so it's made me a more disciplined writer.
Where'd you have to do that?
I had to reshoot stuff at the beginning of Get Him to the Greek to launch that movie correctly.
How did it open and what did you have to add?
And by the way, reshoots are amazing. I love them. They're
100%.
the greatest thing in the world. So this isn't like I'm mad I had to do reshoots. I love doing reshoots.
But anything that could help the picture.
Yeah. I always think that reshoots should be part of the budget because, 90% of your reshoots go into the movie. And,
we definitely agree. But I did want to ask you, what was the initial opening and then what did you add to help? Was it a clarification issue?
Something I've become more and more intrigued by is point of view in movies, which character point of view. And so in that movie, I started the movie showing Russell at this big party with Rose Byrne, who was his wife, and Rose dumping him, and then him falling off the wagon and starting to drink. And then it cuts, and then it went to the credits, and then we went to Jonah Hill's character. And it just was bad. It just wasn't a good way to start the movie. It felt better to start in the point of view of Jonah and have this celebrity and meet the celebrity through Jonah. And so what we ended up doing is shooting some stuff all actually on video cameras to create a kind of news montage to show Russell's character falling apart. So we start with this African Child music video, this terrible music song that he wrote. And
I remember this.
Exactly. And then it becomes a media montage. So the audience is in the perspective of Jonah Hill's character. They don't know that. of seeing a celebrity through media. And so then when you finally meet Russell, he's like that character, you're leaning forward because it's like meeting a celebrity, you know. It's you see, you know, your whole life you see Marlon Brando on TV, on movies or whatever, and then you get to meet him. It's a very different experience.
Did audiences tell you that?
I don't remember exactly, but you know, you asked the question, what parts were slow at the beginning, you know?
Well, the beginning is often slow because you're setting characters and setting the scene, so to speak. But in this particular case, it was almost a tonal shift you wanted, huh?
That's point of view. And the same thing happened on Neighbors as well. So it started with a whole sequence of them doing a bunch of stuff to get kicked out of their fraternity. And then we cut to Seth and Rose. And we ended up realizing the point of view is all Seth and Rose. So we just started with Seth and Rose. And then they see the frat moving in next door. And that was the first time we see Zach is through their eyes.
Did you write it?
I didn't write it. No, Andrew Cohen and Brendan O'Brien wrote that.
So you were invited to the party.
Yeah, so I've been friends with all those guys, Seth and Evan. And I remember Evan Goldberg called me up and said, we have this movie for Zac Efron and Seth. It's called Neighbors. Da, da, da. And I immediately understood what the movie was emotionally before I even read the script, which was just like basically the two times I'd had an existential crisis in my life was when I graduated from college and when I had my first child. And it was the very similar feeling of my life not being my own and being out of control. And today, right now, talking to, no. And so I was like, oh, I know exactly what will connect these characters before I read it. And then I read it and the script was really funny. It had some of that, didn't have other parts of it. And Brendan and Andrew are super funny and we kind of developed it. And then
how has being a dad informed you as a filmmaker?
Oh, hugely. And this is actually something else. This is funny. When I listen to Will's interview, I always make movies that are like about what I just went through. You know, not Cordially Invited. That's like about something that I'll probably go through in the future. So like Neighbors was about new parenthood, really. At that point, I had 2 kids, but it was fresh in my mind. Or Sarah Marshall was about dating. Again, at that point, I was married and, you know, expecting a kid. So I'm always like looking back and trying to find, it's not autobiographical, but the emotional experience of each movie is
that in a way why you chose to do Dora? For your daughter?
Oh, yeah.
I know you have 3 girls, right?
Yeah.
As I said in the beginning, and I don't mean to be flippant about it, but it's like, you know, you see this adult comedy, Dora the Explorer.
Yeah, and Muppets.
You know? Yeah, and Muppets. Yeah. But did you make that decision because you wanted to leave a legacy for your daughter is what I was kind of getting at. But maybe I'm overthinking it.
When I direct something, I have to emotionally really understand it, the core. With writing stuff, I have to get it, but it's more like, do I think this is a funny idea or do I think the character is compelling? And with Dora, I had a take on it that made me laugh. And then my good friend James Bobin came on board and he had directed Muppets and Muppets Most Wanted, and then he was interested in doing Dora. And so I was really excited to get to work. I just love working with him.
Well, it was actually a really fun movie.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. There was a brightness to it. But of course, it's a property that's relegated to a primary target.
Yeah.
So what is next in terms of Nick? When I say that, I mean television, first of all. You have 2 projects right now. Are you show running them? So
I have 2 shows. So I co-created this show that's based on Goosebumps with Rob Letterman.
Love Goosebumps. I worked on all the movies.
Oh, cool. Oh, so you know Rob Letterman. He directed the first movie.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yes.
So Rob and I are old friends, and we co-created this TV show based on Goosebumps for Disney Plus, and the first season came out this past Halloween.
How did it do?
It did well, I think. It did well.
Great.
And we're basically on the fingers crossed, seem to be
renewed.
Hopefully. We don't know. But hopefully. I can't say it officially. I don't know.
Great.
But hopefully we will be. And then Platonic was a show I created with my wife. We did a show.
Who was your wife?
Francesca Del Banco. She's a novelist, and then we created a show called Friends from College for Netflix that we did 2 seasons of, and then we did the show Platonic for Seth and Rose Byrne.
How'd you meet her?
We met through friends. She went to Harvard. We weren't the same year, but we met through friends a few years after college.
And she writes mostly, you said, novels?
She wrote a novel. We write together.
Oh, I see. So you created 2 shows with your wife. One was Friends from College, and the other's Platonic.
Yeah.
How is it working with her?
It's great. I love working with her.
Really?
We love
How do you
working
do
together.
it without killing each other?
It's funny. People ask that. We just kind of like share a brain about this stuff. If she doesn't like something, then I'm like, it's probably not good. And if I don't like something, then she's like, it's probably not good. And I also always say that I like care a lot and also don't care. You know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean.
I care a ton about stuff. And there's certain things that are non-negotiable.
Are you like laying in bed at night before you go to bed and she'll come up with an idea or you'll come up with an idea? Because when Neil brings that stuff up, I'm like, you know what? I can't do this right now. I can't talk business at all.
Yeah. Talking about that stuff at night is rough just because it turns your brain on and then it's hard to sleep. That's literally
Well, that's the whole point. I don't want to get keyed up.
Usually we leave it We tend to leave work at work, I think.
Where is work?
Well, it will be wherever our office is.
Downstairs?
Yeah. No, when we have a TV show, we'll go to an office building.
Any of your girls have the superpower that you and your wife have?
You won't be surprised to hear that being funny is very prized in our house. So they're all, I'm happy to say, funny.
Constantly
we all make
one-upping each
jokes.
other?
Yeah, we're always making jokes and ribbing each other and stuff. And I think that's probably the most important. That and being polite are probably the two things that are most, which can be at odds with each other.
What are you most proud of?
I mean, it's cliche, but my family.
It's not cliche.
Yeah, my family.
I've had guests that say, "Oh, it's my career." I'm joking. I don't think we've ever had anyone say that. They'd be kicked out of their ass, I think. Oh, sure. I mean, that was a total leading question. But let's talk career. What are you most proud of in your career?
I think I feel very proud and lucky that I've gotten to make original comedies and still am able to make them as the industry keeps changing and whatnot, you know. So I think like that to me is just like a huge blessing.
Are you writing anything right now?
I'm finishing Cordially Invited, so I'm really finishing. I have an idea of what my next thing will be, but I haven't started really working on it yet.
Are you a single-focused kind of guy?
I don't have development. I just do my one thing at a time. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you need breaks after a movie generally, or are you on to the next thing?
I'm usually on to the next.
Yeah, because the cadence is like...
slow. Yeah, like post always ends up being a lot slower. Like production is intense. You always need a vacation after that. But the post ends up, you know, if you're lucky, not being super... I think for visual effects movies, that's not true.
How do you prepare before you go on set with Reese and Will? First day of school. You nervous?
Oh, yeah. Because they're like, I'm obsessed with both of them.
That's what I'm saying.
Like obsessed.
So what do you think about? How are you preparing for that first day?
So rehearsals are super important to me. And I always demand...
Tell me about that.
Yeah. I always am like, we need a week of rehearsals. It ends up being, honestly, probably 2 or 3 days of a few hours. You know, it's really just reading the script. Partially it's to meet actors I haven't met before and to get their vibe, which is most of the actors in this movie I didn't.
Where do you usually do your readings?
In my hotel room. Is that weird? No, I'm joking. And it's reading the script. I've done some blocking, but it really isn't blocking. It's mainly reading the script, reading the scenes, and making sure it all makes sense. There's no pressure because what you don't want to do is be on set and have the actor. I'm very collaborative. I want everyone's ideas, but you don't want the actor to come on set and throw out the scene because then you're under the gun. And then it's, you know, and I've been very lucky. I haven't had that happen really.
Have you had a bad behavior though?
Not really. I mean,
you're doing comedies mostly. And I don't mean to sound flippant with that comment. It's just that people are there to have a good time. And the actors really have to be of a certain energy consistently. It's kind of tough, right? Maintaining that.
Yeah, I describe directing a little bit like hosting a party. It looks like I'm relaxed. I'm not relaxed. But I try to make it relaxed for everyone. But the rehearsal period is very important. Also, for example, in that movie, we have some amazing comedians, Rory Scovel, Leanne Morgan, these great Southern comedians. And so I wrote what I thought they would say. They are much funnier than me.
Is that the brother and sister?
The brother and sister.
Oh, my God.
They're so funny. Jimmy Tatro, who's plays...
And Madeline, is that her name?
Leanne Morgan.
No, the bride.
Oh, well, there's Geraldine Viswanathan, who's Will's daughter, who's a genius.
God.
She is just a genius.
Amazing.
And then Meredith Hagner. Who's so funny. I'll say to like Leanne or whoever, Rory, whoever, I'll be like, what do you think this character would say or what would you actually say? In a rehearsal, there's no pressure. There's no like time pressure. And so people will just kind of riff and we'll joke around about stuff. And we discover stuff, a lot of stuff, because the characters that I write, I want to adjust them for who I
You let the actors play?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So you'll leave the camera rolling?
We do improv, but it's a lot of me being like, now say this, now say that. And it's pretty focused on this, and it has to be on story. What I don't like is a feeling of riffiness. When I'm watching...
Movies don't come off that way. They always seem situational. Yeah. They always come out of the character. It feels like that. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Obviously, my favorite movies would be like Broadcast News or Terms of Endearment, these movies that feel naturalistic but aren't riffy. They are written. You know?
Do you feel like because Reese and Will are both really good producers as well, it may put more pressure on you?
It was just helpful because their notes were really smart.
Ah.
So it wasn't, and they also were very respectful. So it was like the whole thing. It was like we were all adults in the room, you know, we're all around the same age. And they were like very respectful. They were like, you're the director. But they were also like, gave me really smart notes, both of them. I mean, that really helped the movie a lot and changed the movie a lot. And they also gave them to me at the right time, like as I was writing the movie.
When does it come out?
I don't know.
Oh, because people need to see it. It's just so beautiful. And I love the music that you use.
Oh, yeah. That's what I was going to say.
The interludes. before coming on air, we talked about going to New York, and you said, I just saw Merrily We Roll Along and Sweeney Todd, which is, you said
amazing.
Also, and those are the exact two shows that I'm going to see when I go to New York in a couple of weeks. Tell me, though, why you like the theater so much and how you use theater music.
Yeah, I love musicals. I love Sondheim specifically. A Little Night Music is maybe my favorite thing ever made, like of anything. Like it's
Isn't
so
it rich? Are we a pair? Here at last on the ground.
Yeah, it's just the most beautiful musical. Anyways, I was working on this movie, Cordially Invited, about this. It's a big wedding movie, almost Shakespearean in its like mix-ups and stuff. And I was in pre-production, and I was going on a jog where I do most of my thinking, and I suddenly realized that I had been inspired by Little Night Music to write this movie on some level. And I was like, wait, I think the opening credits should be set to the overture of Little Night Music. It was like, it all kind of came to me. I was like,
I didn't know that was it.
Yeah, that musical is very famous, but I don't think the overture necessarily is. And I wanted it to be like a tense, kind of weird, but also magical opening to kind of set the tone for the movie. And I've never really done a credit sequence like that before because it's not something that's done. Usually people are blasting you into their movie as fast as possible. I had this idea of how to shoot it, and I work with this great DP, John Gulisarian, and his wife, who's my production designer, Teresa Gulisarian, and we started talking about it and kind of shot the sequence set to this the overture of Little Night Music.
So you had the music in advance. How interesting is that?
It was so, it's something that a lot of directors do that I don't tend to do, and I'm going to do it from now on. Like really try to figure that out because it's just.
Well, again, talking about hooking an audience. Yeah. If you're going to do main on main in the beginning of the movie, you want to be able to really grab them and advance the narrative, not just be over picture.
Yeah, and it sets a tone too. And I wasn't sure if the audience would be bored, but when you watch, now you film the audience is like sitting, they're like into it. And I also make a big choice to have operatic music throughout. And the audience is into it, which I was like, they might hate this.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know.
Nick Stoller, we can talk forever. You are such a talented filmmaker, and hearing your perspective, I think, is really going to interest so many people who listen to this podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm going to see you on the next one, which is going to be soon.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks. See you soon, Kevin.
To our listeners, I hope you enjoyed our interview. I encourage you to check out Nick's shows Goosebumps on Disney Plus and Platonic on Apple Plus, as well as his upcoming film You're Cordially Invited with Will Ferrell and Reese Witherspoon. Please also check out my book, Audienceology, at Amazon or through my website at kevingetz360.com. You can also follow me on my social media at Kevin Goetz 360. Next time on Don't Kill the Messenger, I'll welcome actress, producer, and marketing strategist Colleen Camp. Until then, I'm Kevin Goetz, and to you, our listeners, I appreciate you being part of the movie-making process. Your opinions matter.